Hi everyone, welcome to Math with Miss Ambel. Today we will learn about Intro to Quadrilaterals. Do you know quadrilateral stands for quadra, which is four, and lateral, which is sides. So here are some of the examples and non-examples. What do you notice? Answer in the comment below. Parallelogram is one of the quadrilateral. There are properties in the parallelogram. One of the properties is that opposite sides are parallel, hence the word parallel. You will see that the side AB and DC are opposite, so they are parallel. Same with AD and BC. And this is how you draw the tick mark. Alright, so the second property of parallelogram is that the opposite sides are congruent. You will see here that opposite sides AB and CD, also AD and BC have equal measurements, right? So yeah, and this is how you draw the tick marks, just like a single line. Alright, so the third property of parallelogram is that opposite angles are also congruent. You will see in here that angle B and angle D are congruent. They are opposite from each other and they have the same measurement. And angle A and angle C are congruent. They have the same measurement and they are opposite. Next is that consecutive angles are supplementary. Consecutive means next to, supplementary means 180 degrees. So if you see on the diagram, angle A plus angle B equals to 180 because they're next to each other. Also, angle B plus angle C equals to 180 degrees. They're also next to each other, right? And angle C plus angle D is 180 degrees. Lastly, the diagonals of parallelogram bisect each other. So what are the diagonals in this diagram? Line segment AC and BD are diagonals. So bisect means cuts into two equal parts. So in this diagram, BE and ED have the same measurements, right? So the line segments are congruent. So similar to the other diagonals, AE and EC have the same measurements, so the line segments are congruent. Another shape that is part of the quadrilateral family is the rectangle. Rectangle have all of the properties of parallelogram, including opposite sides are congruent and opposite sides are parallel, opposite angles are congruent, but there's another addition to the property, which we will see next. So an additional property for rectangle on top of parallelogram is that all of the interior angles are 90 degrees. But this is the same by definition like parallelogram. If you add them up, the consecutive angles are supplementary. Something else that is different from parallelogram is that the diagonals are congruent in rectangle. As you see in the measurement here is diagonal AC and BD. Take a moment and pause. What differences do you notice between a rectangle and a parallelogram? Another type of quadrilateral is a rhombus. Rhombus have all properties of parallelogram by definition, with the exception that all sides are congruent, as you see here in the diagram. Also, in the diagram, you'll see opposite angles are congruent, but they're not 90 degrees. Next, the diagonals of rhombus bisect each other. As you see in the diagram, the measurements of each diagonals are cut into two equal parts. Something unique about rhombus is that the diagonals are perpendicular bisector of each other, meaning the diagonals meet at the center and creates 90-degree angle. Lastly, the diagonals of rhombus bisect the angles. Here in the diagram, the diagonal DB cuts angle D into two equal parts. And also it cuts the opposite angle, right? Same with diagonal AC, cuts angle C into two equal parts. Take a moment and pause. What differences do you notice between a rectangle and a rhombus? The famous square is also part of the quadrilateral family. It has all properties of parallelogram by definition. So square have all properties of rectangles and rhombus by definition, as you see here in the diagram. The interior angles are 90 degrees. The diagonals are congruent. The diagonals bisect each other. The diagonals bisect the angles. And the diagonals are perpendicular bisector of each other. So here are all of the summaries of what we just learned for this lesson. There are other quadrilaterals, but we'll learn it in another episode. To be continued.